Hi, and welcome to week 6 of English 2332. We've got just a couple of things to discuss with you today, including the reading assignment from the syllabus, from the course calendar, and your next response paper. I will get those first response papers graded as quickly as I can, but it will probably be the end of this week. I've got several other classes that I'm working on right now, but I will get those back to you as quickly as I can. I like to make lots of comments on the first paper so that when you read those comments, you know how to improve moving forward. I also strongly encourage you to ask questions. If you have questions about the paper, you can just drop me an email, of course. You can call or come by during office hours. But I want to make sure that you're clear so that you know what you're doing right as well as what you're doing wrong. And I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but very often, not just my class, but most classes, the comments are almost always negative, simply because we don't have enough time to tell you everything you've done right. Okay, that would take a lot of time and a lot of just space, and so we generally just focus on the areas that need improvement. All right, well, we'll get the next assignment sheet up and going today. Let's talk about Sappho. If you've watched the PowerPoint and watched the videos, you may be feeling a little confused about the poet because a lot of the information is contradictory. In fact, the PowerPoint says that we don't have much of her poetry, which is true. We have very, very little of her poetry surviving. And they say that's because during the medieval period, when the church, the Catholic Church, was coming to power, they attempted they really didn't like her homosexuality, and so they went out and attempted to find and destroy all of her poetry that they could. Then another video I was watching today, a YouTube video, said, no, that's not it at all. Her poetry had already died out because of language drift, because of dialect drift, meaning the language that she wrote in was kind of forgotten. And so her poetry was still there, but we just don't know. So kind of keep that in mind. Is everything we're going through in the ancient world, the best answer is we don't know, because while we have lots of assumptions and lots of guesses and lots of very good deductions, we really don't know. When it comes to Sappho, probably a little bit of both. She was a gifted poet, came from a rich family, but why none of her poetry survived? I mean, literally survived. It's one thing to have the dialect just be forgotten and kind of drift so far apart that you can't translate it anymore. That's one thing, but you still have the physical copy there in front of you. But then to just not even have that, it makes you wonder. So anyway, just kind of keep in mind that we really don't know exactly what happened to Sappho. She really was a good poet from what I can tell of what little writing we have. I think we've got one complete poem of hers, Ode to Aphrodite, and then just like a verse here and a line there, and just mostly these were things that were quoted by other people. The problem with that is, suppose they misquoted her. Suppose they pulled it out of context. Suppose they fixed it for her. We don't know. What we do know of her is that she's a good poet. And she writes about women, and she writes about strong emotion, and she argues that love, presumably physical love, is to her more important than, quote, armies, victories, and even family. So she puts a pretty high standard on her definition of love. But, does she deserve the place of honor that she receives? Or is it because of her sexual inclinations? We don't know. But we do know a lot more about Oedipus the King, written by Sophocles. Now, this is really fascinating. Did you ever see the movie The Matrix? Keanu Reeves stars as the character Neo, and at one point, I think in the first movie, he goes to see the Oracle, who's going to tell him if he is the one. And she says, no, I'm sorry, you're not the one, which is ironic because it really is, spoiler. But of course he's dejected, he gets ready to leave, and she says, oh, Be careful about the vase. When he hears this, he turns around to ask her, what vase? And when he turns around, he knocks the vase off and it breaks. And she says, you know, what'll fry your noodle later is, would you have done that if I had not asked the question? Or had not made the prophecy. That's an example of a self-fulfilling prophecy, which you see a lot of. Well, you see a really, really good example in Oedipus. Now, the title of the play is Oedipus the King. I call it Oedipus Rex because when I studied it, that's what we called it. That was the name back then. Rex is just Latin for the king. And so don't be confused by that. All right, so you got, I'll let you guys read it. You know the plot. You understand what happens. But I want to make sure before you try to read the play, and I did provide a link to a good translation. I think you'll like the translation. It's very helpful to know who the characters are. So I posted a PowerPoint with just the characters. I also posted a PowerPoint of the discussion questions that we use in class because for a couple of reasons. Hopefully the questions will help you think about what's happening in the play. And also, if you can answer the questions easily, then you know the play pretty well. But let's talk about the characters first of all. Okay, so you got Oedipus, the main character, the main guy. He is the Prince of Corinth. He becomes, because his adopted parents, Polybus and Merope, are the current king and queen, so he's the prince. He's going to become king someday. But then, when he leaves and goes to Thebes, he becomes king of Thebes, the king of Thebes. And he saves Thebes from this plague. Now, look at the plague. It's not just an ordinary plague. It's not like the Black Plague or the measles or something, COVID. It's a disease that kills not only humans, but cattle and animals and even crops, and it kills the newborns. Think about what it would be like to live in a society where all the babies died, all the baby cows died, all the new grown wheat and crops died. It would lead to a severe hopelessness. I mean, no hope for the future. And that's what it's intended to do. But now think also, who is the god of plagues and who is the god of prophecies? Both very big. He walks with a limp. His name literally means swollen foot because of what happened to him as a baby. And he's married to a beautiful, slightly older woman named Jocasta, and they have 2 sons and 2 daughters. Creon is her brother. He becomes king of Thebes temporarily when Laius, the real king, goes to Delphi to get a prophecy explained. And he says, repeatedly, he doesn't want to be king. And he explains it pretty well. He says, why would I want to be king? My sister's queen, my brother-in-law is the king, and I have all the power I want, I have all the money I want with none of the headaches, none of the responsibilities. I am happy. Tiresias is an old man. He's blind, and he works for the temple of Apollo. And this temple of Apollo at Delphi explains prophecies. People go to him with prophecies, and he explains them for him, and that's his job. And he's pretty outspoken. Jocasta is the daughter of Menelaus. She is the wife and the widow of Laius, and she is the wife and the mother of Oedipus. You got Laius, who's the first husband. You've got different groups, and then Polybus and Merope and a couple of other people. Don't forget Apollo. Although he appears a little bit, he's still a main character, kind of like Athena was back in the other thing we read, whatever that was. All right, let's talk about the themes in Oedipus real quick. What is a theme? It's a main idea, usually unstated. You have to kind of read it and kind of figure it out. One of the main themes of this play is taboos. What is a taboo? It's something that your culture has deemed is really, really icky, really not cool at all, lots of times it's illegal, but it's illegal because it is a taboo. Cannibalism, good example. That's gross, and nobody does it. First of all, because you'll get sick, and it is against the law. But it's just one of those things that most cultures have said, not only, 21st century America, but most cultures around the world, with a few exceptions, have said cannibalism is just gross. We don't do it. Well, another popular taboo is, of course, marrying your mother. Now, I'm not talking about a marriage ceremony. I'm not talking about where you stand up in front of a priest and say, I do. In the Greek culture, getting married was a synonym for sleeping with. So sleeping with your mother or your father, your parent or siblings was extremely gross. Now, you got to remember, this is a culture that had pretty open sexual values. They pretty much slept with whoever they want to, except other than their immediate family members. It was just something you didn't do. Of course, there's a biological imperative against it, because when you sleep with immediate family members and you produce children, those children are often deformed, malformed, defective in some sorts, and it gets worse the more often it happens. Study history, you'll see some good examples. And so anyway, so that's why it's such a terrible thing when someone suggests that Oedipus is going to marry his mother, marrying, quote, meaning sleep with. You're going to sleep with your mother. And of course the implication is, and this prophecy came from Delphi, came from supposedly Apollo, before Oedipus is ever born. When Jocasta is still pregnant, somebody tells her, oh, he's going to sleep with his mother, he's going to sleep with you, and the other taboo, he's going to kill his own dad. Of course, you're not supposed to kill your father. That's really bad also. Highly illegal, highly immoral, just a really, really bad thing to do. And so to pronounce this double curse on this unborn child is really bad. And Jocasta takes it to heart and says, well, we just can't have this. And so they puncture his ankles, tie him together with a leather thong, and put him out on the side of a mountain to die from exposure or wild animals, which to us seems pretty gross also. But they don't have any blood on their hands. So anyway, you got this prophecy about him sleeping with his mother, and of course the implication is that it's going to be more of a rape type situation than a voluntary thing, because there's no way she would do that. He must be a real monster. You see that word come up over and over again. What a monster he is. What a monster he is. Look also for this minor bit of prophecy when Oedipus is mad and yelling and accusing and searching for this terrible monster in his court or in his kingdom. How many times does he say, and if I know of the guilty party, let everything I throw at you guys, let it come back at me. Let me be the recipient of these terrible curses, these terrible punishments, if I'm in any way involved. Let's see. Oh, yeah. The thing here in this play is that Oedipus apparently does everything he can not to fulfill this prophecy. When he first hears about it, he thinks Polybus and Merope are his parents, and so he immediately leaves town. What else can he do? So that makes us ask the question, which is more important, fate or free will? Now, free will means that you have the ability to change anything you want in your life. And everything you change or everything you do is your responsibility. On the other hand, fate, if you believe in fate, then you basically believe that nothing you do matters. That Oedipus apparently believed in fate because no matter what he tried, the prophecy came true. Again, spoiler alert. But by attempting to avoid it, he appears to be exercising his free will, even though we see fate stand up and take a hand. But you could also say, well, it wasn't fate, it was Apollo, who was another free will actor in this scenario. He simply had to have more power and had the ability to influence more things than Oedipus does. You know, Oedipus is the king. I'll let you read that part. Guilt versus shame. This always arouses a nice discussion in class because what's the difference? Are they the same thing? Guilt versus shame? Is one internal, one external? Is one inherent? Is it born within us? Is one cast upon us by society? Um, and then sight versus blindness. Of course, a very common metaphor. Sight, light, enlightenment, all mean knowledge, awareness, understanding, and blindness means the absence of those things. But Tiresias, the blind prophet, understands more than anyone else early on in the play. And when Oedipus, literally the moment he understands, the moment he accepts the fact that he's guilty, he blinds himself. Yeah. And then action versus reflection. One of the discussion question asks, is he a man of thought or a man of action? If you're an old Star Trek fan from the original series, you remember Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock. Mr. Spock was the ultimate thinker. He was not only highly intelligent, but he considered his actions and possibilities and alternatives. And Kirk, on the other hand, rushed in and broke the Prime Directive and phasered all these enemies and attacked first and asked questions later. You know, kill them all, let God sort them out. So they were embodiments of these two opposites. And the discussion question asks you, how do you see Oedipus? Was he a thinker or was he a doer? And then the question becomes, well, he says that he's going to do these things, and we should believe that he is going to because he does. But is saying something, is that an action? Or is it more a thought of a reflection? Okay, so themes, main characters, all you got to do is read the play, kind of understand it, and I hope you'll enjoy it. It's pretty deep. It's very thought-provoking. One of the highlights of Greek philosophy. If you've ever heard of an Oedipal complex, the idea promoted by Sigmund Freud, he gets it from this play. He also gets it from the play Hamlet, but most directly from this play, in which he says, and this is his idea, not mine, but he believed, although his theory has been modified since, but he originally believed that every boy wanted to replace his dad, i.e. kill his dad, wanted to replace his dad and sleep with his mother. Now, of course, it's all subconscious, and our society largely ignores that, if they've ever heard of it, and I have no idea if it's validity, but at least now you know, if you've ever heard the phrase, at least now you know where it comes from. Y'all have yourselves a good week, and we'll talk some more later.